So maybe you find yourself dating somebody who you feel like is very supportive, very consistent, but you're curious. How can I know whether or not this person is actually securely attached so that I can prevent myself from falling for somebody who may turn out to be really emotionally unavailable later on? And if you don't recognize these 6 crucial signs that somebody is securely attached, you may either push somebody away accidentally from fear or find yourself in a position where you do date somebody who may not have any of these things and you just didn't realize it. So in today's video, we're going to talk about 6 signs that somebody you are dating is securely attached. Of course, you can check in and see if this is something that you find yourself doing to check your secure meter and where you're currently at as well. And my hope for you is that by the end of this video, you are so clear about your dating experiences, but also about where you're at in the relationship to yourself as well. Now, if you're new to this channel, hello and welcome. My name is Thais. I'm so happy you stopped by. And I put daily content out here about attachment styles, dating, and relationships after being in the field and working in private practice for more than a decade, and now moving into a space where we're publishing our programs online. So here's the first thing that I think is really important. And I just think this is a non-negotiable if you're hoping to have a secure relationship long-term. And it's that this person communicates openly and honestly. And if we look at either polarity of the attachment continuum, both are going to create a lot of long-term challenges. So there's the obvious. Somebody doesn't communicate much at all. They hold everything in. They don't speak up. They just push somebody away without ever trying to have a conversation about what's bothering them or causing them concern. And of course, that's very avoidant of somebody to do. But on the flip side, if somebody's also not communicating because they're too busy people pleasing and they're afraid to take up space and share their true needs or their feelings or share whether or not something has affected them, that is equally painful and detrimental to a relationship. Even though it's sponsored by good intentions, both are coming from a place of self-protection, self-preservation, and both cause resentment and challenges to the relationship long term. Because if you're not communicating at all, obviously you're not going to solve for anything. And if instead you find yourself in a position where you are never communicating because you're people pleasing, that's just going to lead to a lot of long-term resentment that's going to come out in the relationship in other ways. And what honest communication looks like in the early stages of dating is it doesn't have to be that you've been on one date and then you tell somebody like, hey, you should have texted me more throughout this week and you make all these demands. But as you start to get to know somebody after 2, 3 dates and you're like, you know what, I do want to continue getting to know this person better. There is a mutual attraction or interest. It starts by you communicating your needs. So you may say, if you're not getting as much texting as you would like, you might say something like, consistency in communication is something I really look for in relationships. And you're giving that person the information they need in order to better consider you and see if it's a fit and see if it's a match. And if you're somebody who opts out of doing that because you think that I don't want to share too much or say too much about myself, then all you're doing is you are scared to take up space. You're not showing or sharing your true self. And it's a form of self-silencing, and it will come out in the relationship long term in other more painful ways later if you're not truly vetting for compatibility by sharing your needs early on. And of course, once you're a few months into dating, if there's something that does affect you, even a few weeks into dating, like 8, 10 weeks into dating, you can say, hey, I'm needing more texting from you, or I'm needing more consistency from you in this because I want to see where it goes, but that's something that I'm really looking for. And you can be more direct as time goes on and as you get to know somebody, but secure people communicate early and they communicate all the way through and they're open and honest because they realize in order to properly vet whether or not a relationship is a fit between two people and a match for long-term compatibility, it requires you to put your cards on the table. We have to be able to communicate to see if this is actually going to be a fit long-term. Number 2, if there's a conflict, and this goes leapfrogs off of number 1, if there's a conflict in the relationship, they will handle it constructively. Secure people, they are not going to run from disagreements, and they're also not going to turn disagreements into personal attacks. And this is something that I can relate to, having not been securely attached and then eventually, doing the work and becoming securely attached. At some point in time when I was fearful avoidant, I would, feel like there had to be somebody who was right and wrong in the conflict. And I would take things personally, or I would, sort of be spiteful sometimes, even if somebody was hurting me, I'd be like, well, you do this too. And you're not any better, like those things where you say things back and it's like this lashing back. And I realized as I actually started doing the work, years ago, how unconstructive that is. Like how it's literally not doing anything except driving a wedge between you and somebody you care about. And sometimes it takes humility. Sometimes it takes us being able to, humble ourselves. If somebody has feedback for us or is upset about something, we can't get prideful about it. We can't turn around and be like, okay, I need to be right. And they can't be saying this about you. We want to actually be humble enough to truly hear what somebody is saying towards us or what their feedback is, even if it's not delivered in the best way, even if they're coming from a triggered space. And if you can move into conflict from a space of humility, that opens up the ability for you to communicate so much more constructively. So let me give you an example. Okay. Let's say somebody came and said something negative to me, and let's say it was mean. Let's say it was like, you're an idiot. Okay. And let's say somebody said that to me who I'm in a close relationship with. Let's say it was a friend. I will never be okay with being spoken to that way at this point in my life. I have zero tolerance for that. But just because somebody speaks to me that way does not mean I am going to lash out back at that person, because then all I'm doing is, in my reality, I am becoming the thing that I am judging or that I think is unacceptable, right? There's this old quote, and I love this quote. It says, "He who hates evil only creates more of it." And it's this idea, like just because somebody's acting that way doesn't give me a hall pass to behave that way back. And we have to ask ourselves, who do I want to be in the world? So let's just pretend in theory somebody comes and speaks to me that way. And let's say it's a dear friend and it's out of character and I'm so surprised. I'm not going to jump back in and attack back. I'm going to say, hey, I can't believe that you're speaking to me this way. This is unacceptable. I will not partake in any sort of communication like this. Why don't you take a moment, get it together, and then tell me what's really going on so we can have a constructive conversation? And I would give somebody the grace to be able to take a chance to do that, but I would still set my boundary. I would say, this is unacceptable. Now, if they still did this, if this became a theme and a pattern in the relationship, after me setting a boundary in situation after situation after situation, okay, then I'm going to take a step back from the relationship, because I need to actually set a boundary with the person instead of just in a situation if my boundary is not being respected. But, if you are in a position, it's hard to regulate yourself. And to be honest, I did a lot of work on core wounds and rewiring all these core wounds that came with fearful avoidant attachment styles, something we talk about on this channel all the time. And actually, before I even go into the other 4 pieces, if you want to do a deeper dive into rewiring core wounds so that you can feel regulated during a conflict as well and not get so triggered by things, I'll put a link for a free course down below that you can check out fully for free just for a limited time that will help so much with this. It literally changed my life doing this work. And it's about how to rewire those things, like the fear of it being abandoned or being betrayed or trapped or disrespected, like all these things that trigger us so much. It helps you get rid of these things from your subconscious mind, and it gives you more space to actually be able to sit in a conflict and not take it so personally and not feel the need to attack back. But we can enter into a conflict with humility and with the ability to stay regulated and present, but we can still have really strong boundaries around what's acceptable for us and be able to have really high standards for the people that we allow and bring into our lives. And we can take a step back from people who are treating, any type of conflict in an unhealthy way. But, secure people, they handle conflict constructively. They don't lash out back. And so they'll say things like, hey, why don't we figure this out together? Or, I want to understand what's going on for you. And they'll hear each other out about what their perspectives are that are hurting. So they'll listen to each other's feelings, they'll validate each other on their feelings, and they'll listen to what each other needs to feel resolved. And those are really important steps in handling conflict in a constructive manner. Number 3, individuals who are secure, they respect your independence and your need for connection. Okay. So what I mean by this is that something that is so important in a relationship is healthy interdependence. It's part of what brings people into a secure, harmonious relationship together. We have 2 extremes of this again in polarities, right? We have the codependency, which is like, I'm going to do everything for you. You're going to do everything for me. We'll lose our sense of self in the process. We'll never have boundaries. And, we'll just people please each other all the time. That will just lead to so much resentment because you're relying on mind reading in a relationship. You're losing your sense of self in the relationship. And that just comes with the moment I lose my sense of self, now I'm going to have all these high expectations of you because I gave up myself for you, right? So do you see how codependency is like so problematic? But the other polarity is also problematic, right? It's called counterdependency. And it's somebody being like, I'm going to only meet my needs. You're only going to meet yours. We're never going to exchange much because we're supposed to never rely on each other out of fear, right? Is where that comes from. And so that's no good either. What we ideally want to be able to have is interdependence, which is I keep my relationship to myself. I know how to meet my own needs and self-soothe, and I have a rich life in the other areas of life. I have friendships, I have career goals, I have maybe a spiritual relationship to something that's meaningful to me, or, mental and emotional topics that I love to learn about. I know who I am, all these things, right? In these different areas of life. But I also feel equally comfortable relying on someone else to be there for me, to soothe through them, to talk something out with somebody and get their advice and listen to it, or to share what I'm feeling with somebody if I need to in a hard moment. Like that's the space that we want to be masters of both sides. I can soothe myself and I can rely on somebody else, and they're not mutually exclusive. I'm a master at both, right? That's the goal that we're trying to get to. And that means somebody is okay with you having boundaries. They're okay with you pursuing your passions, having friendships, and they're not becoming too clingy or frustrated if you have to spend time with friends sometimes or do something that's not just about them. But on the other extreme, they also encourage time together and are good at showing up for that time together, and they're vulnerable and they open up and they share those things. Okay. So there's 3 more big ones, and I'm going to kind of rapid fire through them because I'm aware that this video is becoming a little bit long. But these are really important. So another big thing is this person is consistent. Okay. If you have somebody who's like all in and then they're gone and then they come back and then they're gone again, a lot of inconsistency, is not a great sign. It's definitely a red flag when it comes to secure dating. When you're with somebody secure, they'll be transparent. They'll put their cards on the table. You won't have to guess where you stand with somebody. And their actions align with their words. They tend to be congruent. They'll say, hey, you know what? I need some time to myself this weekend. Why don't we just hang out Friday instead of Friday and Saturday? Or, have plans this weekend with my friends. I'm going to see them on Saturday. Why don't we spend some time together Sunday? They'll put everything out on the table. You won't be like, they won't say things like, oh, I'm not going to be here to hang out this weekend and just leave it at that. They'll let you know why or what's going on. They'll let you into their life. But you'll see them consistently. You'll hear from them consistently. Consistently and constantly are 2 separate things. Consistently means you'll hear from them on a healthy daily basis, maybe a text exchange in the morning, a text exchange in the evening, once you've been dating for a few weeks. Constantly is you hear from them all day, every day. They never spend more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes not replying to a text. Constantly moves into codependent territory. Consistently is secure. And I want you to check in with yourself there. Like, where are you at between consistently and constantly? Because sometimes we get triggered because we're expecting constantly when consistently is actually what's healthy. Our next one here, number 5 of 6, is the person you are dating is emotionally available. And what I mean by this is they are able to be present. They listen. They are capable of sharing their inner world with you and being vulnerable. They can talk about your feelings and hold space for them. They can share their own feelings. And if they're upset or triggered by something, you're going to know why, and vice versa. Like, they're not going to be highly triggered and so stressed out. But if they get like a little upset or hurt by something, they're not going to make you guess why. They're not going to punish you for it in silence and then hope that you figure it out. That they're going to tell you what's going on so that these things can be resolved. And that is actually a huge part of creating trust over time. If we can share our inner worlds with each other and respond in positive ways, that's really how we're building those roots of trust over time. And last but not least, they take accountability. Okay. So they are comfortable acknowledging their faults. They are comfortable, working on the relationship. If there's something that's a challenge between the two of you, they'll work to try to compromise. They'll apologize if they feel like they hurt you or made a mistake. And it shows a lot of that maturity and commitment to consistent growth over time. Now, of course, there's so many other things we could go into. That's 6 of 6. That's it for today. If you have more questions about this topic or about secure attachment styles, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, somebody who could benefit, and subscribe to this channel for more daily content.